Today we wanted to talk about how do we navigate the pandemic using data? How do we navigate the pandemic using planning activities? We know that the pandemic has, oh, sorry, I'm having technology challenges this morning. Here we go. Let's try again. Okay, let's hope I didn't break it now. Okay, so why are we talking about this topic today, and how can we help you on this? So we wanted to talk about how we can use data and some planning activities to navigate the pandemic. At the Institute of Government, we have the opportunity to work with governments across the state of Georgia, state agencies, workforce development organizations, and we know that the pandemic has changed every facet of life in Georgia, and it's really impacted our communities. And we're in kind of an interesting time right now in the life cycle of this pandemic. We're all getting back to some semblance of a new normal. Certainly it's different from where we were several months ago. Certainly life's going to be different for a long time yet to come. But we also know that workforce development organizations are going to play a critical role. We see week after week what's happening with unemployment insurance claims. We see what's happening with tax revenue. When we talk to stakeholders and partners, we know the challenges are real. We know that our economy is having some real hiccups right now. So we want to talk about how we use data and planning to navigate this pandemic, and how we can move forward with this. So I'm pleased to have my colleague David Tanner here with me today as well. And David and I will be tag teaming this presentation today. I was looking through the attendee list, and it's good to see so many friends and also some new friends as well today. So hopefully this is helpful for y'all as you're moving forward, doing your important work. So what we wanted to talk about today is kind of three different things. So the first thing we wanted to talk about is access to unemployment insurance claims and sales tax data. So at the Institute of Government, we've visualized data made available by other state agencies with the kind of the premise of helping us to target our workforce development type activities, to inform that, to give us more real-time data. David's going to demonstrate some of the apps that we're talking about here today, and others may be helpful as we navigate the pandemic on georgiadata.org. And then finally, we're going to wrap up by talking about some planning frameworks to help workforce organizations navigate the pandemic. We know we need to get through this. How do we do that? What are our best options for that? What are some ideas there? So what we want to do is we want to engage you a little bit to get started here this morning. So I'm going to hopefully change over, and this is going to work seamlessly. We're going to use a tool called Slido. So if you want to pull out your cell phone, or if you're on a computer, you can open up another tab. You can take a picture of the QR code on your cell phone. But we're going to go to slido.com, and you're going to use the event code MAX2020. You don't have to download an app or anything like that. You can either go to it on your browser, take a photo of it on your phone, and you're going to go to slido.com MAX2020. And we're going to use this to get a couple of polling questions and get your input, because we think this is going to be a better session with your input as part of this. So I'll give you all maybe a little bit longer to get to slido.com or pull it up on your phone, and the event code's MAX2020. So let's start with this first poll question, just a very simple and easy one. I'm just curious, how are things going generally on a 1 to 5 scale, with 1 not being so great, maybe 3 is okay, 5 is things are really great right now. I'm just curious, kind of what's the sense of the workforce developers that are here in the room today? Maybe take another 15 seconds or so on this one. So I know some folks are still getting it set up and working. Just keep on doing that. We're going to use this for a few more questions later on, or now and then later on today. And that's kind of what I expected. If I was going to fill this out myself, I'd probably say I'm a 3 or a 4. Kind of somewhere in the middle. Maybe a little Eeyore today. I don't know. It is Friday, so I'm excited about that. Okay, let's go on to a more substantive question here for this morning. So I'm curious about what is the biggest challenge that your workforce organization is facing currently. So this is going to pop up a text poll here, and you're going to be allowed to enter some text. And I want to know, what's the biggest challenge your workforce organization is facing right now in terms of this pandemic? And I'll just let y'all respond, and then we'll go through as a group and look at these and see kind of what we see here. Give everybody a few more seconds on this, and you can keep typing, but I'm going to scroll down to the bottom in a second, and so y'all can see what we've been talking about here. So folks have said, what skills to reskill for? Computer literacy with remote work and remote jobs and virtual job fairs, continuing uncertainty, funding for training, adjusting to the new virtual reality and providing services, consistency in virtual services, public engagement, how to rethink workforce development for an increasingly automated world, uncertainty for employers, reentry into the workforce for remote positions, consistency, capacity to push multiple initiatives at once, the safety question, and what is the new normal going to look like, how do we reach dislocated workers and safety, hiring agreements not being fulfilled for our graduates. So we trained people, we had positions ready to go, but things just didn't work out because we're in the midst of a pandemic. We're a training organization where we lease space. We have to go online, but we still have those kind of fixed costs. Yeah, for sure. All these things are real challenges here. So I got one more question that I'm curious about, and then we'll get into this. I'm curious, what data is your organization tracking right now to navigate the pandemic? So as a workforce development professional, what data are you looking at right now to help you do your work? So I'm curious about this. So let's see what folks have to say here. So unemployment data, job seekers and employers that are now hiring. So this pandemic has also created some weird opportunities where there's industries that are hiring even more than they were before. We're looking at industries that are most affected by the layoffs. So who's been hit the most? Job posting data, unemployment numbers, COVID-19 numbers, mobility data, permit data, unemployment rates, demand for technical training, job seeker interest, occupations and industries that were impacted the most, unemployment data. So certainly it sounds like we're looking at a lot of unemployment data. We're looking at some kind of qualitative data as well. We're looking at that COVID data. It's probably all looking at very similar data sets. We're going to come back to this slide a little bit later on this morning, but we want to talk about some data right now. So here's kind of the challenge we face, and I'm a data nerd. Looking at the list of who's here this morning, I know there's some other fellow data nerds here with me today as well. You know, one of our big challenges to inform pandemic planning is that a lot of our labor market and economic data that we look at is severely lagged, or the data that maybe is available in a more real-time nature is not available at a county level or at the metropolitan level. So we're having to make decisions and inform strategy, you know, based on data that happened pre-pandemic, or based on data that happened in the first month of the pandemic. And certainly we want to be using the best data we can, so that we can help our communities move forward. So a solution, and not a perfect solution, is to try to adopt some more real-time indicators. And today we're going to talk about two in detail: sales tax distribution data and unemployment insurance claims, to help frame these workforce development, economic planning, recovery conversations. And you're going to hear me talk about, and David as well, that these data are not perfect, nor are they comprehensive, but they can be useful when they're combined with quantitative, qualitative, on the ground, real-time job posting data, and we can kind of get at what those needs are if we combine all of this together. So the one that's probably newer to workforce development professionals is sales tax data. This sales tax data comes from the Georgia Department of Revenue, and they release data on distributions. So a distribution that happens in May reflects April collections. So for example, at the end of May, the Georgia Department of Revenue released distribution data for the cuts they checked, the checks they cut to local governments for collections that were made in April. And we think that sales tax data is a good proxy for workforce developers to be looking at, because it gives us a sense of economic activity and consumer confidence. And there's two reports that David will show you. One is on sales tax distributions, and that's looking at distributions made to jurisdictions. And it gives us a sense of overall trends and year-over-year change, and it can really help you zero in on communities. And you see some really interesting patterns across the state. David may show you some of those. The second data set, and I think it's one that's probably most relevant to workforce developers, is commodity data. So the Department of Revenue makes available data looking at where did the sales tax collections come from? You know, what are the sources of those? What industries are paying or are remitting higher amounts of sales tax or lower amounts of sales tax? And the Department of Revenue breaks these down into commodity groups that are made up of various NAICS codes. So we can drill down and see what happened to accommodations or retail or automotive or various services. And again, this is going to be helpful for year-over-year trends, but it's also going to be really helpful for you to know what industries in your community may be paying more sales tax, indicating growth. It may also be helpful for you to understand what industries are coming back. So we see some things where the April distributions were really kind of anemic, but the May distributions showed some opportunity and some growth there. So that may be helpful as we're targeting our efforts. And this will make more sense as we demonstrate what it looks like here in just a second. The other data set, and probably one that we're more familiar with, is the initial unemployment insurance claims data. These come from the Georgia Department of Labor, and we're appreciative that they're publishing this data and making it available, and really in a lot of different forms of detail, you know, for us, and doing it in really a timely manner. So thank you to our friends at the Georgia Department of Labor for that. This gives us a sense of who's making initial claims for unemployment insurance. You know, and I'm talking to a group of workforce developers, so I don't have to go into detail on what this means, but you know, it's someone who's lost their job or had their hours reduced. And the great thing about this data set is it's broken down by that 2-digit NAICS code for those initial claims. You know, the initial insurance claim is a proxy for economic conditions in the community. It can get a sense of what's happening in various sectors. I do want to note, though, is that please remember that these are initial claims for unemployment insurance. And as we move further and further from the beginning and the shutdown that happened in March, we are seeing more economic activity. We're seeing businesses and organizations that closed for a period of time and laid off employees, in some cases returning back to work. So as you analyze these numbers, at least in your mind, you may want to, I don't want to use the word discount, but I'll use that here. You know, some portion of those that filed an initial unemployment insurance claim back in March or early April are probably back at work already. Unfortunately, we don't have continued claims data yet in Georgia, but know that not everybody who filed for initial unemployment insurance, those claims may not have been found valid, or if they were found valid, they may still now be back at work. So how do we make sense of the data? You know, we've talked about two sources here today that are helpful. You know, neither one of these is going to give us exactly what we need to do to be able to move forward. But managing the economic impact, managing recovery for a workforce organization or a government entity, it's really going to require three different approaches to this. So the first thing is what we're talking about here today. It's this near real-time data. It's sales tax data, that's initial claims for UI, that's local unemployment rates. Maybe that's some data from Burning Glass or, you know, IMSI's job posting tool or Chimara. We're going to combine that with our traditional data, like our lagged economic and labor market data, our financial data, and that's going to give us a sense of, you know, kind of where were we when we came into this, but also making sure that we keep in mind that some of that may have changed. And then I'm talking to workforce developers here today. You all know this in and out, that we've got to keep engaging with employers and our economic development partners and our local government partners, because they have on the ground truth and intelligence that can help us make sense of this. I know that employer and economic development engagement's more difficult in a remote world, especially with employers. For employers that are actively hiring, you know, it may be difficult to get them to join a webinar or a meeting. You know, dropping by is not necessarily an option right now, but it's still going to be an important part of what we're doing here. So I'm going to turn it over to David now to demonstrate a couple things on georgiadata.org that may be relevant as we navigate and plan to move through this pandemic.
Well, thank you, Greg, and good morning to everybody. I just want to, before I go into the demo, just share with you that the data we're presenting is publicly available data that made available by the Georgia Department of Labor and the Georgia Department of Revenue. And we're just repackaging it and providing additional context and abilities to analyze the data that's already made available. We appreciate the great work these agencies are doing to make this data available to us. And I hope that the interfaces we've created will make the data much more accessible for you and easier to analyze. So I'll share my screen here and we'll go to the website. Let me just say that we do have a good number, about 40 people on the webinar today. If you can hold off clicking into the website until after the demo's completed, then that will give me a chance to kind of navigate without any other competition, if you will. And the slides that we'll be providing do have screen by screen instructions on how to use the website as well. And so you can follow along with that PowerPoint when you get it. So first of all, we'll go to the website georgiadata.org under topics, COVID-19 economic data. I'll click on that. And we get a list of some visualizations and tools that have come up. So I'm going to just open these for each tab real quick. I'll talk you through sales tax and then initial unemployment filings. So when you open this tab up here, first thing we'll see is some information about sales tax distribution files by jurisdiction. You can search information by each of the different tax types, including hosts, which is hotel option sales tax, the MARTA tax, SPLOS, transportation SPLOS. You can look at data for urban and rural counties or economic development regions 1 through 12, or a given month. The app defaults to the latest month of the information that's been provided, which is the May distribution file. You can just see that information. I'll just make it easy. I'm going to click on this little magnifying glass and type in Cobb. And in this interface, you click on the green check mark to kind of lock in your filter selection. The filters show up here in this box right up here. So in Cobb County, there's 3 jurisdictions that receive some form of local option sales tax. That's the Board of Commissioners, the County Board of Education, and the Marietta City School Board of Education here. And first thing you'll draw your eye to is 17.5, negative 17.5. So that's the percent change from May of 2019 compared to May of 2020. So 27.3 million in local option sales tax distributions in 2019 versus 22.5 for a decrease of 17.5. And you can look at these comparisons. The red bar is the 2020, the blue is the 2019 number. Again, if I want to look at what April distributions look like, I just click on April on the table updates, and it was down 13%. That would be the March data, right? Because April distribution. And I'm going to unclick that, and it'll go back to May, and May shows 17%. If I go to the next tab here, we then can look at the data that's provided by the commodities report, which looks at data by industry group. One thing I'll just note here, in the explanation, there's a link right here to NAICS Industries. If you click on that, it'll open up a PDF document right here, which will help you know what particular 4-digit NAICS codes are grouped into each of these categories we're going to cover in the commodities report. So that's just a reference table there for you. So if I come down here and we're interested in Cobb County, for example. So I can also filter by using a map here. So I'll click on the green check mark. I've got Cobb listed, Cobb highlighted. And this bar chart's not dynamic by year, but it looks at the 2019 distribution of sales tax data. And we can see in 2019, Cobb County got 21% of its local option sales tax data, revenue from the food and bar group. And again, if we go back here, we can see food and bar includes grocery stores as well as restaurants and liquor stores and full service restaurants. So kind of grocery stores were up, but restaurants were down, right? So if we want to look at the current data for May by each of these commodity groups, we just click on this little plus mark here. I do that again. And you can see the information for each of the commodity groups and what the change was from last year versus this year. And accommodations is down 76% compared to last year, whereas this large group of food and bar, it's down 12%. Could have been down more, but grocery stores we know have been very busy during this pandemic. Okay, so this does give you that kind of look, and this can give you a leading indicator to which industries may be impacted more or less at the 2-digit, kind of this 2-digit level or roll-up level, and see who's kind of being impacted more or less in terms of employment or business activity. Going to the next tab here, we can look at this data over time. I've got Cobb County here already selected. The bar chart shows those commodity groups. And you can see the difference in the purple here in accommodations from 2019 to May of 2020. And the food and bar group here as well. So that's really helpful visually to kind of see how the distributions have changed from one year to the next in a given month. We can also look at the bar chart. So the red line is what the 2019 distributions were versus the 2020. So the difference between this blue line and the red line here for May is that 17% change. You can also see this change here. And the point from April to May on the blue line is shown in this table over here. It's a 2% increase in sales tax revenue. If you were to spin it, that would be an interesting spin. Sales tax is up 2% compared to the previous month, but it's actually down 17% from the previous year and 13% for April distributions. So a lot of really interesting information here. I think the trend line data is also very helpful to understand what the normal cycle is for a given county in terms of sales tax revenue. Typically, we do see an increase in the January distribution, which reflects the holiday period. That would be the collections done in December. But in Cobb County, historically, in the last couple of years, you've had the Braves playing in Cobb County, and that's really impacted, obviously, food sales as well as accommodations. You have Six Flags and Whitewater. So a lot of different things going on there in the tourism industry. And so the Cobb County is probably going to look at their historical trend and see what industries are affected most by the pandemic and think about how that will change for 2020. We already see that playing out for April and May distributions. And this file, by the way, comes out at the end of the month. And so towards the end of June, we should get the the next distribution file for May collections actually come out. There's quite a lag. So as soon as we get the data, we do update it from the Department of Revenue. Okay, so let me just now switch to the UI data, similar interface. You can see here, I've got Cobb County. We're updating the data that came out yesterday, so that should be updated a little bit later this morning for you. But we look at Cobb County, they had 9,651 claims filed on by June 6th on that collection day, and a cumulative since March of 181,000. As a point of reference, we've added an estimate of how many people are in the labor force to get a ratio in terms of a order of magnitude, so about 45%. If all these claims were valid, that'd be about 45% of the workforce filing a claim, which we know is not true, in that there are duplicates and some claims have, need to be adjudicated and so forth. So, but it does give us a general sense of what the impact is. I can look at data for a given county. If I clear out my filter here, I just click on the X here. I could look at example and see what the trends have been there. I could look at a whole region, which is also kind of interesting. If I was interested in the coastal region, I could click here. And you can see, even in the coastal region, the impacts in terms of the cumulative change, when I look at these ratios, is different depending on the county you're looking at. So Long County at 32% has a lot of military presence versus at Chatham County, which is at 66% in terms of order of magnitude. I could look at, clear that out, and look at Region 3, which is where certainly the max folks are focused. And you can see a lot of difference in terms of just where the distribution of claims are. The map is color-coded by darkest being a higher share versus a lower share, if you will, of the workforce. So moving forward, with Region 3 highlighted here, it carries over, and I can see over time, a lot of the claims in Region 3 happen in late March, early April, and has kind of gratefully slowed down a bit in the recent reports. If I wanted to break this out by industry, I can look at this tab here and click on industry. It just opens this lineup by each of those 2-digit NAICS code industry groups. And certainly accommodations, food service, that we all know that's been the biggest, the industry that's had the largest impact in terms of unemployment claims. So different ways of looking at the data, kind of over time, by industry over time, in terms of cumulative. The next tab allows us to look at the industry, the region as a whole, and I can click this open. Again, as Greg mentioned, this data is early indicator data by industry code, which gives us some sense of what's going on. And these ratios, again, are just there as a rule of thumb to see which ones have a higher impact versus a lower impact in a given industry. So you can scroll down and kind of see by industry code where the share of claims are coming in compared to others. We did our best to estimate by region what the employment might be by each 2-digit NAICS code using MZ data for this visualization. So a lot of great information here that the Department of Revenue and the Department of Labor puts out. We hope this interface allows you to do some more comparative analysis. Most things on the screen are filters. This map is a reference map, by the way, but not a filter. But you do search by these. Anywhere you see a magnifying glass, you can do a filter and search there. Okay. One of the things, we've had this site up for a little while, and people are surprised about how much data is actually here. If you click on topics, just the top topic, you can see if I scroll down, there's quite a bit of data here in different categories. One of the things the Institute has been doing for years now, in partnership with our College of Ag, is updating and putting out a Georgia County Guide. And then what we do is we visualize certain tables of data from the county guide in this data visualization tool. So there's data about agriculture, if you're interested in agriculture topics, courts and crime data. All of this data is annual data, not updated monthly or weekly like the other data sets we just looked at. But it does give you kind of easy access to, say, K-12 enrollments or health statistics or other information put out by the census, like county business pattern data, and so forth. One thing that a lot of folks ask is, like, I just need easy access to census data, some context. And so we do have population data in here from the US Census estimates. I was with a group of educators recently, and they're asking me, how do I go find, data by age group really easily? Well, I showed them this tool, and they were like, oh, that's great. Because they were curious, what does the pipeline look like for, education age, K-12 age students? So if I go here, I can look at population by age, which has the years across the bottom, age groups that census produces down the side here on the y-axis. And then I can look at my age groups that might be in school, right? And what's trending. So I can look at what does that pipeline look like in different age groups. We can see this is the statewide view, and again down here we have a whole table by county, by year. You can see 15-year-olds has been steady. The 1 to 4 is trailing down, and so is the 5 to 9. And so, as we all know, the birth rates have been changing. That's impacting this cohort. From this interface, again, I can look at a given county. I might be interested in, say, Hall County. And here's their data specifically in a table. And I can break that out. This is a pivot table, so I can just slide this over here and put it above county. And now I have the breakouts by year pretty easily laid out here for us. So this tool does give you a lot of information, a lot of access to data. Again, under topics, you can click there and select any topic you might be interested in. And if you have suggestions for us about what might be helpful to you in your work, or you can, I will just say Emily Franklin, who's our analyst, maintains all these apps, and she can also be emailed here at emifrank.uga.edu. There's a lot of information quick, so we do have an interactive data guide here, which walks you through how to use the different visualization tools and filters. And there's a short video here explaining how that's done if you want to rewatch that. And I know this webinar is also being recorded, so you can follow along. And we are offering the PowerPoint slides as well with the step-by-step slide for you. So with that, I'll stop sharing. Greg, can you bring back up the PowerPoint? So I wanted to just mention that we do have the ability to offer enhanced access to these visualizations through the server version of our tool. And there is a cost to that. If you want to learn more about it, it does allow you to download the data into Excel very quickly. And depending on your level of interest, you can also purchase a token that allows you to import your own data and create your own visualizations. And if you have a need that we can help you with in terms of visualizing data, we do support projects for various clients in terms of visualizing their own data and helping them with their analytics work. So as I mentioned, most of this data on our website is updated annually, with the exception of the sales tax and the unemployment insurance file data. The unemployment data is updated weekly, sales tax is updated monthly. So I think this is a good place where we can pause, Greg, and take any questions that folks may have. So Matt or Joy, if there's questions, we can answer this. We'll take a pause here.
Hey, David, this is Matt. You got a question from Amy Lancaster King about if you wouldn't mind hopping back onto Georgia Data and showing the group about the opportunity youth in the region, illustrating kind of that dynamic with the data y'all have.
Let's see.
Is there an easy way to do that for y'all right now?
So what we probably want to do, Amy, is schedule a separate webinar, because that's actually not on our public website. That's a tool that we've created for the Georgia United Way. And that was basically, it's maintained for them. So we could definitely do that at another time. But it's a great tool that allows access into census data about youth who are out of school and out of work, and helps us understand where they are in the metro area.
So David and Greg, we're kind of waiting on a couple more questions to come in. Just another friendly reminder, if y'all have questions, feel free to add them to the Zoom chat, and as well as the Q&A box. We'll be able to kind of grab them and read through them as we come in. One question I just had for y'all, just out of curiosity, like, and again, y'all well know this, we've spent a lot of time together prior to and virtually during the pandemic, but certainly not as mindful of all this data that's coming in as y'all are. But just from like you could look at these numbers and kind of just see how unprecedented they are, as far as we were looking at historic low unemployment back in early March, and now we're facing the exact opposite already. But just to put into context, I mean, how unprecedented right now, looking back now that we've had maybe a month or two at least of indicators to illustrate kind of what the impacts of this pandemic are. I mean, do y'all just have a hot take just as far as how unprecedented this change in our posture right now has been?
If I wasn't living through it, I wouldn't believe the numbers. I think if you look at these numbers and you look back to historic data trends, especially with unemployment insurance, we've never seen something like this. We've never seen this kind of weekly claims. It's Friday, so I'm an optimist. I'm hoping that the predictions about kind of a V-shaped recovery pan out. But we're also seeing some signs of things maybe getting better. It's still going to take some time, but certainly this is going to have an impact. Beyond just on the workers, it's going to change industries. I think it's going to shepherd in this automation thing we've been talking about for a long time in the workforce world. I think we're going to see a lot of companies do that as well, and make investments there. It's going to change education. So I think Matt, certainly unprecedented is what I would say. And then I think this goes back to where we're going to go here in a second, is that beyond just economic recovery and helping our communities get back to where they were, I think, and talking to others across various sectors, is that this is going to shepherd in innovation and transformation. Some of it more positive, some of it's going to prove some real challenges. David, what else would you add? What's your assessment on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing when I look at that sales tax line of 2019 versus 2020, it really puts it in perspective in terms of on the sales tax data, like how different this and what a real impact this has on communities. We know local governments, I should mention, and school systems, they're not as worried about the 2021 budget because so much of their revenue is based on property tax. But they do see, and they do have some recovery CARE Act money in 2021. What they're worried about is 2022. And at least at the local government level, that seems to be where a lot of angst and concern is how to better plan for 2022 and potential decreases in property tax, or just, people not paying their rent, which lends itself to people not paying their property tax. So we're not through this yet. I did want to mention, Greg, that we do have additional resources on our website. There's a COVID-19 resources page at the Institute where we have recordings of webinars we've done, as well as a budget balancing tool and a cash flow analysis tool. So if you're in the financial side of your organization, please check that out. So if there's a template or some assistance we can provide you, we're happy to do that.
And I'll paste that link in the chat here, or David, if you can. Matt, I think there's maybe a question that came in as well as we were talking.
There is, yes. I believe this is from Brandon Ona over in DeKalb County. As COVID-19 continues and hopes to resolve, what data resources can we turn to determine the critical job gaps that need to be addressed or come about from the temporary unemployment that would be resolved naturally as the economy opens up?
So this is kind of this $1 million or $1 billion question. And I think I'd be a rich man living at the beach if I had a great answer for you, Brandon, on this. because it kind of goes back to that graphic that I ended my section with, is that no one data source is going to answer this question. I think we'll get some hints of this as we see, the sales tax data and the unemployment insurance data start to change. I think you'll get some hints of this in some of the real-time job posting data through Burning Glass or Chimara or IMSI. Again, I don't think that's a panacea. And then I think you're going to get some hints of this by engaging with employers in your community, by engaging with human resources representatives. I think the Department of Labor is going to get hints of this, the Chamber of Commerce. I think we're going to see this kind of come at it a few different ways. I don't think there's going to be any one data source. I would just really encourage workforce professionals and just to really double down on their business engagement to existing partners that you've worked with over the years, and also with new partners in your community. To continue to check in and find out what their needs are, and just have a cycle on that. Who are the 50 or 100 companies in your region that you're gonna put on your list, and maybe every day you call 5, and you cover that over a several-week period. Because I think that's one of these key questions that as workforce professionals we need to be asking is, what should we be training for? How do we help folks connect to jobs that are hiring right now? And that's an important question, but also a really difficult question. Maybe we should go on to planning, because we're kind of getting into that right now, and then we'll see if we have more questions at the end of this. So what I want to do is I have 2 more Slido questions, because I want to change gears here from data and hear a little bit about planning and how we're planning to move forward. We've heard bits and pieces through the questions and the earlier responses, but let's try this. So if you'll go back to Slido or pull back out your phone or however you were accessing Slido before, again, it's that same event code, MAX 2020. And I've got 2 questions on planning that I'm curious about from our folks that are here on the webinar today. So I'm going to launch the poll. And I'm curious, has your organization undertaken any kind of workforce recovery planning? Yes, we've already done this. We're planning to. Not at this time. Not sure. So knowing we've got a great diversity of folks here, I'm curious. Answer this question as best you can. Well, I'm pleased to see, the planner in me is pleased to see that some of our organizations are already engaging in some of these planning conversations, or we're planning to. Others maybe not ready for that. Maybe they don't have a need just yet for this. Last question is a free response question. I'm curious, what kind of issues or topics should we be undertaking in our planning activities as workforce boards or nonprofits or service providers or economic development partners? What kind of issues or topics should be top of our mind in pandemic recovery from a workforce perspective planning? So as y'all are typing here, the first one was digital divide. And at the Institute, we had the opportunity to work across the state of Georgia in both Metro Atlanta and everywhere else. We've heard a lot about this digital divide, whether it's through workforce development or education or finding a job or applying for a job or accessing services. Certainly at the top of mind, and I think this pandemic has really shown that. y'all keep responding here, and I'll start scrolling through. Living wage assessments. The pandemic is going to create more inequality. Funding. We need to continue workforce initiatives. We need to fund programs that are going to address recovery needs, barriers to employment, creating safe work environments, childcare access, safety, workforce diversity, inequality, the job market shifts, and how do we reskill our workforce? How do we take our training virtual? What does that look like? Are we prepared for that? Training development for the digital divide. How to analyze these essential industries, and how do we build more partnerships with essential employers in our community? Certainly a lot of good topics here. What I want to do is just talk for a few minutes about planning and see what other questions we have here today. So I think y'all kind of hit on my list, of things that I might be wanting to plan for. Like how do we deliver services with social distancing requirements? I've seen several times here today, how do we identify occupations and skills to train participants for? We want them to get a job, and this has maybe upended some of our existing plans and relationships. How do we upskill? I think we're going to be talking about upskilling a lot in the years to come as industry shifts. Funding. Funding is going to be critical. We're going to have more folks looking for services, and our resources, depending on where they come from, may be stagnant. They may grow a little bit. Maybe we're reliant on state dollars or local dollars, and those may be cut in the months to come. How do we forge new partnerships, especially virtually or remote? How do we manage budget cuts or additional demands for services? How do we engage our partners, our board members, our funders virtually, especially as the Zoom fatigue is really set in, from my perspective, folks that I work with. So I want to throw out 3 simple planning frameworks. I suspect that every one of us has been through planning of various types across our careers, some positive, some maybe not as positive. The first one that I really like to use, especially when you hit a bump in the road and we need to figure out where we go, is just the traffic light planning framework. It's basically a red light, yellow light, green light. What should we stop doing? What do we need to continue doing? What should we start doing? And I think this is helpful as we get back into the office, as we look at our service delivery strategy, to ask a question like, how do we deliver workforce development services, in person while protecting our employees? Okay, what do we need to stop doing so we can do that safely? What should we continue doing? What are we going to start doing to protect our employees? So this is a great planning activity because you can do it in 30 minutes to an hour typically. You can engage your team in this. It doesn't tend to require a ton of stakeholder input, but certainly it's kind of a way to stop, press pause, and figure out where to go. I tend to recommend you start by having folks do this individually and then facilitate a group discussion and reach consensus on this. Next planning framework that's helpful is the ADDIE model. So if you have a background in training and development or instructional design, the ADDIE model has probably talked to you pretty early on in that role. So the ADDIE model is kind of at least originally designed for training, but it tends to work well for planning in general. And this is kind of our mid-range planning tool. So it's not going to take us 5 years or 10 years out, but it's quicker than a 30 or 60-day fix. So there's a 5-step process. It's an iterative process. So you're going through and you're making changes over and over to get it right. So you start by analyzing the problem, you design a solution, you develop the solution, you implement, you evaluate, then you iterate, and you go through another round and another round. So maybe we need to develop some new training because we have a new industry that's now a partner of the workforce system. Maybe they're an essential industry, they're hiring a lot. And we go through this process to understand the needs, to design the training, to actually create said training, implement, and evaluate. So this is a helpful process for going through this, for having those conversations. The last one is probably the one that we're all very familiar with. It's just our bread and butter strategic planning cycle. In terms of a pandemic, this one may be a little clunky for the quick response that many of us are working right now. But we also know that it's going to be really important for us to have a long-range view of this. We know that we're going to be working under these conditions for for some period of time. I'm not an epidemiologist. So I don't have a insight into when things are gonna get better. But also too, still keeping that long range view of your work. The next 6 months, year, 2 years, it's going to be really important. Our organizations need to shine. But also, why does your organization exist? How are we doing on our long-term vision? So we've all been part of this framework as well. So what I want to do now is Dave, if you want to jump back on with me here, and Matt, we'll see what other kind of questions we have before we wrap up here in a few minutes.
Sounds good. Thank you, Greg. And we've got one right now. I want to turn the floor over to Amy Lancaster King, our Max board chair. Amy, are you there? She wanted to ask you a question, Greg and David.
Yes, I'm here, and thank you for letting me chime in. It was a complicated question, so I didn't want to go through typing it all, but it kind of actually brings both pieces together, the planning and the data. And as you were showing the Cobb County data, and there was one little bright spot, two bright spots, other retail and construction. And I'm just thinking of this as, when we're planning, I think of construction more as a lagging indicator of a growth economy, because you typically build to accommodate that growth, but not in advance, but after growth has happened, right? And so I'm wondering, do you think that that's kind of lagging from pre-COVID for construction, or what are some nuances that you're aware of in how this industry mix is and how we could incorporate some of that in our planning?
So I feel really good about this question, Amy, because as David mentioned, we've also done some economic impact modeling work. And as part of that, we did outreach to various sectors to find out kind of what they were hearing. So I had a chance to actually ask some construction folks about kind of their forecasts for this year. So what I heard was a couple of different things that were really interesting. So the first thing I heard was that the construction industry, by and large, is already used to socially distancing. They're used to environmental safety requirements and OSHA. So for them, that transition to socially distancing wasn't as difficult as it was for other industries. Second thing I heard that was really interesting, especially early on, as things really came to a grinding halt, was that some construction activities actually able to speed up. So the example given to me was that, before in Metro Atlanta, if we had a dump truck and we were collecting debris and taking it to the dump, and traffic on 85, it might take us 2 hours to get to the dump and back. Now we can do it in 20 minutes, so we're able to do double the amount of loads. They had some challenges with supplies initially in getting things, but that wasn't a huge supply chain challenge. I think kind of where the worry is longer term. So for construction companies that do a lot of government projects, as David saw or showed you there, for a lot of our communities, SPLOST collections can be down. So projects might get delayed. They might get put on the back burner until things improve. Same thing as Georgians have driven less. We're seeing less motor fuel tax revenue come in. So we know that there's going to be less road projects in the years to come. And then on the commercial and residential side, a lot of that's really tied to consumer confidence. So I suspect that we're going to see some commercial projects change because work from home. And we know that residential is tied to consumer confidence and the markets and lending. So that really kind of is gonna come to bear how things look over that. But I think Amy, you're right though, to look for those bright spots, to look for those areas where things are growing, so we can go to that targeted outreach and say, hey, do you have any needs? Can we develop those training programs for you? So it might be construction this year, and then we're going to see some other bright spots, and we can zero in on that. So I think that data and that outreach together is going to be really important.
It's interesting too, Amy. There was, as we did our economic modeling work, and we do offer that by county. If you want an economic impact study for your county, just let us know, because we do have that in place for this, where we are right now. We can help you with that. To just echo what Greg had to say, we did talk to the state, and any construction project that the state's funding has been bonded and encumbered, and so we probably won't see an impact on the state side of construction for a couple of years. So just want to let you know about that. Matt?
Thank you.
Y'all, this is like the end of a radio segment when they're about to go to break, and I don't want to give someone, I want to give them more time than I have. We have about 30 seconds left before we got to, I think, wrap up. We have got one more question. This is from Linda Simmons. What about some of the areas that are more heavily impacted? Is there not a lot of, where there is not a lot of growth? Could y'all answer that very quickly?
So I'll try. I think it depends. I think a lot of it is based on the industry mix that we're seeing in various communities. I think some of it's dependent on communities that are maybe more bedroom communities versus hubs of industry. And I think on that question too, the one thing that I keep saying, like a broken record, if you've been around me, is that we're not through this pandemic yet. We're not through the economic impacts. Things tend to be cyclical. Things come in waves. So, early on, retail and accommodations was hit very heavily. Some of that's coming back. Other sectors are going to be hit as we have supply chain issues, or as consumer confidence wanes, or the dollars that can be spent. As governments and other organizations have to tighten the belt, we might see cuts or layoffs there. So the impact is going to be spread over some period of time. I hate to bring us bad news on a Friday, but it's going to be a wave, and that's why tracking this data is going to be so important, because we're going to see all these waves come and go, and we're going to have to be nimble and ride the waves as we go forward.
Well, y'all, on that note, again, I just want to thank y'all so much for your time and your insight this morning. Again, from everybody here at Max, certainly just very, very grateful for y'all being able to join and us being able to learn and hear from y'all, and getting the chance to see some of the great things y'all are doing. So just thank y'all so much for your time. Y'all, real quick, we're right at the 10 o'clock hour. I just want to thank everybody that tuned in this morning for taking some time out of your Friday to be with us here. Just real quick, normally we do these every 2 weeks. Obviously, the next bi-weekly date would be July 3rd, and many people are going to be observing the Independence Day holiday that day. So we're actually going to have our next Max Minutes be July 10th, same time, 9 o'clock on Friday. And then following that, we'll go back to the 2-week gap, and then July 24th. So if you want to mark your calendars for those dates, and I know Joy and the Max team is going to be sending out more information about those as we get closer through Max Mondays and some other notifications. So again, Greg, David, thank you all for everything you and the Carl Vinson team are doing, and thank everybody for tuning in today, and looking forward to joining y'all the next time we get together. So everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and have a good rest of your Friday.